do I still want to do this shit?
Mm-hmm,
You know what I'm saying?
Cause you know how hard it is.
Some people say, I want to go play baseball.
And you think it's funny?
Right?
Yeah. And then I want to come back. Or some people say, I'm going to go 22 straight. And, you know what I'm saying? So it's a contract I feel like you got to have with yourself, too, in order for you to be a, you know, great ball player or to have a long career. That's the goal, to be in the league for 20 years.
I'm biased against LeBron when it comes to comparing him to Michael, joining Dwayne and those guys. Because, you know, when we had this debate, and LeBron's amazing and spectacular, but I was like, Michael didn't join anybody. He just kept getting his ass kicked and got bigger and got stronger and finally knocked the wall down. And, you know, Kevin, who's a great player, you know, other than the fact when he joined the Warriors, he hasn't been successful anywhere else. And I don't hold that against him, but he wants to be considered in that list. He's not on that list. He's not on that list. He's a great, great player, but he's not on that list. He wants to be like, wow, he's not in a GOAT conversation, because you're not, plain and simple.
Damn.
You had great success when you joined the Warriors, but not only did you not have success, you actually flamed out in those other places. You got swept last year in the playoffs. You didn't even make the play-in this year.
They thought it would land as a lighthearted moment, just two superstars cracking jokes on their own podcast. But the second Kevin Durant tossed out that baseball jab, everyone who knew the history felt the air change. It wasn't just a random quip, it was a shot aimed directly at one of the most emotional turning points in Michael Jordan's life, the moment he walked away from basketball after his father's death. And sitting right next to him, LeBron James didn't push back or clarify. He didn't pause and acknowledge what that moment meant for the sport. He laughed, hard. To fans who grew up on highlight reels and GOAT debates, it felt like normal banter. But to players who lived through that era and watched MJ grieve publicly, that laughter hit differently. It wasn't harmless. It wasn't just boys talking. Older players saw it as a reminder of something they've been feeling for years, that today's stars believe their accomplishments shine brighter when they dim the legends who came before them. And what made it even more shocking was where it happened. Their Mind the Game podcast has slowly become a place where they shape narratives, dissect legacies, and subtly insert their own perspective on basketball history. Over time, little jokes and passive comments have turned into a pattern, one that seems to downplay the grind of the 90s and elevate the challenges of the modern era. So when KD mocked MJ's baseball venture and LeBron joined in, it wasn't seen as a single slip. It looked like another piece of a growing puzzle, one that felt disrespectful to an entire generation of players who paved the way. What they thought was a harmless laugh carried weight they clearly didn't expect. But the reaction they got was nothing like what they expected. For years, Charles Barkley watched the new generation dance around the edges of NBA history, tossing out sly comments and self-serving narratives without anyone pushing back. He let most of it slide. He laughed off the podcasts, the social media quotes, the thinly veiled comparisons. But this time, when KD and LeBron laughed at one of the most personal chapters of Michael Jordan's life, something in Barkley snapped, and he didn't hold back. He came out swinging, not with cheap shots, but with the kind of blunt honesty only Barkley can deliver. First, he went straight at Durant, saying what millions had whispered, but few dared to say. Publicly, KD's legacy changed the moment he joined a super team. That decision, Barkley argued, placed him in the history books, but not in the way Durant wanted. Outside of Golden State, Barkley pointed out KD's record is filled with frustration, early exits, and unmet expectations. Talent alone, he said, isn't legacy. Leadership is, and KD still hasn't proven he can carry that weight. Then he turned the spotlight on LeBron. Barkley accused him of something even heavier, controlling narratives instead of letting the game speak for him. Instead of respecting history, Barkley claimed LeBron keeps trying to reshape it. Whether it's declaring himself the GOAT, downplaying the 90s, or steering conversations on his own platforms, Barkley saw it as an attempt to rewrite the past instead of honoring it. It wasn't the jokes that set him off. It was the pattern, the arrogance, the assumption that legends would stay quiet forever. This time, they didn't. And Barkley wasn't alone. The entire 90s era felt attacked. Barkley's outburst cracked open a door that had been shaking for years. The moment his comments went viral, fans immediately pulled up receipts, starting with LeBron's infamous line, "We done with the 90s." It was a throwaway comment at the time, tucked into a larger debate, but now it resurfaced with a whole new meaning. To legends from that era, it wasn't just a casual remark. It sounded like LeBron finally saying out loud what he'd been hinting at for years, that the era that built the NBA no longer mattered. And then there was KD, who has made a habit of slipping in subtle jabs at older generations. Whether it's calling past defenses overrated, mocking how players trained back then, or suggesting that the old heads exaggerate their battles, his comments follow a pattern. To him and many modern players, the game today is harder, smarter, faster, and superior. But to the guys who actually lived through those years, hearing that feels like disrespect layered on top of dismissal. That's why the baseball joke hit so hard. It wasn't one moment, it was the latest spark in a fire that's been building for a decade. The players from the 90s see it as a steady erosion of their legacy piece by piece. They fought through hand-checking, brutal physicality, and an era without player empowerment. And now they feel today's stars brush off their achievements as outdated relics. To them, this isn't a debate. It's a takeover attempt, because today's players, especially the biggest names, aren't just celebrating the modern era. They're pushing a narrative that the old one was weaker, slower, and easier. It's not just generational tension, it's a full-blown era war, but this feud goes way deeper than ego or pride. Behind all the jokes, podcasts, and subtle digs lies a truth neither LeBron nor KD can fully escape. For LeBron, every season that passes feels like another reminder that 6 rings, Jordan's unshakable benchmark, are still out of reach. No matter how many records he breaks or how long he extends his career, that number sits there like a shadow he can't outrun. And deep down, he knows the longer he plays without closing that gap, the louder the comparisons become. That kind of pressure doesn't stay quiet. It slips out through frustration, competitiveness, and eventually, subtle jabs at the very legacy he's being measured against. KD's insecurity takes a different shape. He has the talent, the craft, the scoring brilliance, but the validation he wants has always stayed just out of reach. His greatest triumphs came on a team he didn't build a team, many say didn't need him. And ever since he left Golden State, every playoff failure has amplified the narrative he hates the most, that he can dominate but not elevate, that he's historic but not iconic, that he belongs in the conversation but not at the head of the table. It eats at him, and it shows. So when these two future Hall of Famers throw shots at the 90s or poke fun at Jordan's painful moments, it doesn't come from humor. It comes from pressure aging bodies, closing windows, relentless expectations, and the heavy realization that history might not remember them exactly the way they want. When greatness feels threatened, people don't confront the fear directly. They rewrite the story. They reshape the narrative. They tilt the lens to make their own journey look bigger, harder, more impressive. And that quiet rewriting, it isn't quiet anymore. And that rewriting is already transforming the NBA's culture. Something strange has been happening in the NBA over the last few years, and it has nothing to do with the X's and O's. It's the rise of the narrative wars, a new battleground where players use podcasts, documentaries, and social media to rewrite how the game's history is remembered. Instead of letting fans and journalists debate legacies naturally, today's stars are shaping the conversations themselves, sometimes subtly, sometimes aggressively. And when those conversations favor them, they spread fast. Podcasts like Mind the Game or player-run media shows have turned into platforms where past eras get downplayed and modern accomplishments get elevated. You hear phrases like, the 90s wasn't that tough defense back then, was primitive, or those guys couldn't survive in today's game. It's a slow drip of comments that add up to a clear trend, diminish the past to inflate the present. And it's not just LeBron and KD. Several current stars have joked about older players being plumbers, suggested that Jordan's defenders were subpar, or implied that the physicality of past eras is exaggerated. To legends who fought through those battles, those comments aren't funny, they're dismissive. They erase the grind that built the league's foundation and disrespect the players who paved the road these modern stars now walk on. That's why the older generation sees this as more than trash talk. They see it as a strategic shift, a new era trying to rewrite the old one instead of respecting it. And according to them, once you start telling the world that the past doesn't matter, you risk tearing down the very structure that made the sport global in the first place. And here's the part nobody saw coming: the backlash to these narrative wars. It's already turning around, but the twist nobody expected. The backlash is already aimed at them. The irony in all of this is painful. The very players who tried to shape the narrative are now becoming victims of it. The younger generation of fans, the TikTok crowd, the Reddit analysts, the ones who didn't grow up watching LeBron's early dominance or KD's unstoppable scoring are already rewriting the story in real time. And they're not impressed by late career reinventions or carefully curated media moments. Every time LeBron releases another podcast episode, another documentary-style monologue, or another subtle "I'm the GOAT" hint, young fans fire back with jokes, edits, and clips that strip away the mystique he spent 2 decades building. Instead of strengthening his legacy, these storytelling moves are giving his critics more fuel. The more he tries to explain his place in history, the more people start questioning why he feels the need to defend it at all. KD's situation is even more intense. He can't go a week without jumping into online debates about his legacy. He responds to fans' claps, back at trolls, corrects narratives, and constantly revisits the decision that has followed him for years joining Golden State. Instead of boosting his image, his online presence makes it look like he's forever trying to justify himself. The more he talks, the more fans dig up old failures, missed opportunities, and playoff collapses he'd rather forget. And social media. It accelerates everything. One viral clip can overshadow months of greatness. One poorly timed joke can redefine a player's reputation. The mystique that once protected superstars is gone. The curtain is pulled back, and every word they say becomes ammunition, sometimes against themselves. The narrative war they started is now turning on them. And what's happening now is just the beginning. As the spotlight intensifies, the flaws in both LeBron and KD's legacies are becoming impossible to ignore. For LeBron, the obsession with controlling his place in history has grown louder than his play. Every new interview, every calculated podcast clip, every moment where he subtly declares himself, the GOAT sends a message, not of confidence, but of urgency. It feels like he's fighting time, fighting perception, fighting comparisons he once embraced. And the more he tries to steer the conversation, the more people notice how desperate it looks. Greatness usually speaks for itself. When you keep explaining it, people start asking why. KD's cracks look different, but they run just as deep. Every time he's gone somewhere to prove he can be the leader, the story has unraveled. Brooklyn collapsed under pressure. Phoenix looks unstable. And the more he insists that rings don't define him or that legacy debates don't matter, the more it feels like he's trying to convince himself. Legends notice that pattern, the incredible scoring, the unmatched talent, but they also see a star who hasn't shown the grind or leadership that defines the highest tier of basketball immortality. And within this shift, a bigger truth is emerging. Today's stars want the glory of greatness without the humility it requires. They want the crown, but don't want the weight that comes with it. They want to critique the past while expecting immunity from future criticism. But the game is more transparent now than ever. Fans see every inconsistency. They hear every contradictory statement. They watch every late career move with heightened scrutiny. The cracks that once stayed hidden are now front and center, magnified by a 24/7 media cycle that never lets anything fade. And when those cracks finally became too obvious to ignore, that's when Charles Barkley stepped in and dropped the warning shot heard around the league. When Barkley fired back, it wasn't just a rant or a veteran defending his era. It was a warning, sharp, direct, and aimed squarely at the future of the sport. His message was simple. You don't get to rewrite history just because it doesn't fit your story. And that line wasn't only about Michael Jordan. It was about the foundation of basketball itself. The game survives because each generation respects the one before it. Without that chain, the entire legacy collapses. Barkley's point was clear: mocking the past doesn't make you greater. It just reveals your insecurity. And the moment today's stars start tearing down the 90s or laughing at the personal struggles of legends, they open the door for the next generation to do the exact same thing to them. Because history always repeats itself. Fans evolve, perspectives shift, and one day soon, LeBron and KD will be the ones sitting at home watching younger players debate whether their era was overrated, whether their opponents were weak, or whether their achievements really count. Barkley's message wasn't anger, it was foresight. He sees what the modern players don't, that the culture of disrespect they're normalizing will eventually consume them too. Today's stars think they're shaping the narrative, but they're really lighting the fuse for their own future criticism. The same social media that amplifies their voices now will one day amplify the voices of kids who never watched them play and don't feel obligated to protect their legacies. And when that day comes, no podcast, no documentary, no GOAT declaration will shield them. Because the storm they started, they're not ready for it.